The Buu Saga was the final arc of Toriyama's original Dragon Ball manga and the last saga in Dragon Ball Z, and it's one of the most polarizing arcs in all of Dragon Ball. Some people love the fusions, the fights, Majin Buu, Majin Vegeta, new transformations and gods and all that, but when you really look at the arc, it has its fair share of problems. Toriyama at the time was most likely suffering from burnout, compiled with a high workload, and thus the storytelling took a bit of a nosedive. But even if you criticize the Buu arc, there are still some very interesting story elements that should be addressed, and thus on this edition of Dragon Ball In Depth, I conclude my 4-part analysis of the 4 major arcs of Dragon Ball Z with the Buu arc.
この放送はご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
So at the end of the Cell arc, Mr. Satan took credit for disposing of Cell, and all throughout the Buu arc, Satan gets upgraded to main character status, and you can see him all over the Buu Saga as he was proclaimed a hero. In the 25th Tenkaichi Budokai, thanks to a quick payoff to 18, Mr. Satan retained his title and continued to deceive humanity and fool them into thinking he was the strongest fighter in the entire world and that that same world was safe with him. The world was so taken by this and blindly followed him so much that during the final confrontation with Majin Buu at the end of the arc, it wasn't until Satan asked the world to raise their hands and donate energy for Goku's Genki Dama that they had sufficient energy to defeat Buu. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth and his angels were cast out with him. Revelation 12:9. So think about this. A guy named Satan is deceiving the world and people are raising their hands, chanting in the name of Satan just because he told them to. What was Toriyama trying to tell us here? Toriyama has always had the reputation for being a very simple manga comedy writer, but was he telling us something at a deeper level? Toriyama almost never brings up real-world religion in any interviews or in his works, so was this just a coincidence, or was Toriyama actually telling us something here about the state of mankind at the time and the fact that Satan has deceived mankind into following him? Probably not. I mean, they are fighting Majin Buu, a demon, but I've always wondered, is this social commentary about the world being controlled and deceived by Satan? Satan would, of course, continue to deceive the world even long after Majin Buu was dead by using his buddy Fat Buu, otherwise known as Mr. Buu, to clean up the tournament and then throw the fight for Satan. A demon doing Satan's bidding. I guess that makes sense. And hell, you could even go back to when Satan befriends Buu, and right then and there you've got that weird connection. Perhaps no other arc in this series truly defines and then redefines the struggle between good and evil, gods and demons, both externally and internally. But of course, more on that later. Although a lot of Dragon Ball has moments with characters uniting to face a greater foe, the vast majority of the big fights are one-on-one. Goku versus Vegeta, Goku versus Frieza, Gohan versus Cell. These are just testosterone-filled, manly battles, more about their own satisfaction and testing themselves than the good of the universe. However, with the Buu arc, we have a constant theme of unity being shoved in our faces. We've got fusions between characters, one character absorbing other characters, making them a part of his body, mutating to reflect the changes, and then at the end of the arc, we have the unity of all mankind. Even though I am pretty sure Toriyama-sensei stumbled upon this by accident, when all was said and done, the fact that you can tie in a vast majority of this arc to human intervention, perhaps more than any before it, is mind-bogglingly sensical. What about the fact that everybody who was pitted against Majin Buu in the first half of the arc took the L, and it would actually end up being Mr. Satan himself, a regular human with no special powers, the Grand Deceiver, as I mentioned, whom would convince Buu to stop killing people. The painful irony here is that what caused Buu to become so enraged that he spewed out all of the evil in his body to create the evil Buu was caused by two regular humans, two sick, perverse, repulsive humans. It's a reflection of our own society in many ways, as we humans are more often than not the cause of our own hardships. Within the human soul resides mysteries dark and deep about our frailties, our fears, our shame. Today, or 100 years from now, the darkest matter will still lie in the human heart. Goku and Vegeta specifically go from fighting each other to teaming up individually to fusing against Buu to essentially pulling out all the stops to stop Buu at the very end of the arc. And if you remember, it was Vegeta's idea to even use the Genkidama. Goku teaches Goten and Trunks the fusion pose to unite to form Gotenks to beat Buu, and it's ironic that he himself would do a completely different type of fusion later on in the arc. The final battle with Kid Buu wouldn't have been a victory had it not been for the combined efforts of Goku, Vegeta, Fat Buu, Mr. Satan, and Dende, whom were the only ones who survived Buu's destruction of Earth. And I guess the Kais kind of helped out too. But even when things seemed completely hopeless, it was the unity of these people and them putting their brains together to develop a strategy to win, even if it involved the use of the Dragon Balls, both of Earth and of Namek. And in the anime version, we saw almost every character make some kind of cameo in the big finale, but it was all about unity. A lot of people think Dragon Ball should have ended with the Cell Saga, but in many ways, the Buu ending really does tie in tons of loose ends and brings back a lot of fond characters we hadn't seen, as well as provided a fantastic closure for the Vegeta character arc. The final and most prevalent theme in this arc is the internal struggle between good and evil, namely with two characters in particular, Vegeta and Buu. One, a character introduced in this arc, and the other, an established one who was still developing. We'll start with Buu and save the prince for last. When we were first introduced to Majin Buu, we are quickly shown that Buu is very childlike, but not a complete idiot. He took orders from Madoshi Babidi because he felt like he needed to, mostly because he continued to be threatened to be sealed up again, until finally Buu caught him slipping and put an end to that mess in a very violent way. Afterward, Buu continued his rampage, but we saw glimpses here and there of him possibly having a heart, including the incredible scene where he cures a blind kid, then gives him milk made up of dead people. You win some, you lose some. As I stated earlier, shortly after these events, Mr. Satan convinced Buu to turn to the good side, and that also didn't last. Majin Buu's internal anger after seeing Satan and his dog Bee slain actually manifested itself physically, creating the evil Buu, the gray-colored one. This anger was externalized and manifested and wound up leading to evil Buu having a slight edge in power and absorbing Fat Buu to make Super Buu. Even though the evil side was in control, the good side was still there somewhere, which is why Mr. Satan's life was spared. If you go back to the origin of Fat Buu, we are told that when Buu absorbed the Grand Kaio, because the Grand Kaio was a being of supreme righteousness and morality, it made Majin Buu innocent and balanced, although naive. Fat Buu's character was that of an innocent child, whereas Kid Buu, the original and purest form of Majin Buu, was based on that demonic evil child who would always break things and bully other kids. He's still not as bad as the kid from The Omen or worse, Macaulay Culkin from The Good Son.
Don't fuck with me.
I can't watch that clip without laughing. So by the end of the series, the fat Buu that was left would go on to become a manifestation of good, even though he would be a bit selfish when it came to food. Then we move on to Vegeta. If you ask me, as far as character development and writing, the one saving grace about the Buu Saga that's truly a high-level arc is the redemption of Vegeta. At the end of the Cell Saga, with his rival dead and the Earth at peace, Vegeta swears to never fight again, and instead, for the next 7 years, he presumably helps Bulma raise Trunks to some degree, even though he was still training because, well, that's kind of what he does. Once he hears that Goku is returning to the tournament, he gets excited at his chance to finally face his old rival one more time. You see, the truth is that Vegeta never really got over it. He never got over the fact that Goku beat him in the first part of their fight, or that Goku constantly attained higher levels of power ahead of him. That subconscious green-eyed monster of jealousy was always hiding inside of Vegeta. At this point in the series, I don't believe Vegeta really wanted to kill Goku because, well, Goku was already dead, but I do think he wanted to at least beat him in battle and prove his superiority as the prince. It's just a testosterone-driven macho thing. I mean, that's Dragon Ball, right? So when we get to the tournament, what a coinkydink! Goku and Vegeta are matched up against each other. You could practically feel Vegeta's excitement. But then, the biggest cockblock of Vegeta's life happens with the arrival of the Majins and the Kais, and Vegeta's guaranteed fight with Goku seemingly slipped through his fingers due to the priority of this new threat. Once Vegeta sees Goku's fight with Yakun and sees how strong he's gotten, Vegeta comes to the conclusion that this is all BS and that his fight with Goku might never happen, and thus commits one of the most selfish acts of his life, allowing himself to be mind-controlled by Babidi and become Majin Vegeta so that he could fight without thinking about his wife and son. Vegeta gave in to his selfishness and put everything aside initially by thinking that becoming a Majin would make him wicked and evil once again, but Goku quickly realizes that it's not true, calling him on his bluff. Although Vegeta's decision was completely self-centered, Vegeta never forgot about his family or the positive effect that his relationship with Goku had on his life. And that's the sad truth. Once Vegeta realized how utterly stupid he was for helping in the release of Majin Buu, he knocked Goku out by hitting him when he wasn't looking, and would go from being incredibly selfish to doing the least selfish thing he's ever done, sacrificing his own life to save the world. The English dub refers to this as Vegeta's final atonement, which is a surprisingly fitting word for this scenario. The word atonement refers to the forgiving or pardoning of sin, somewhat influenced by the Christian faith. So from this perspective, Vegeta's self-sacrifice was his way of making up for his self-centered behavior. Of course, his atonement would be solidified at the very end of the arc. During the final clash with the Pure Buu in manga chapter 514, a wish is made to resurrect everybody killed, starting with the day of the tournament, other than purely bad people, and surprisingly, Vegeta's halo vanishes and Goku immediately notices. What does this mean? Well, this means that Vegeta, in the eyes of the God Dragon, was no longer made up of purely evil thoughts. Vegeta was considered a good person and truly forgiven for the sins of the past. In addition to that, shortly before, Vegeta shows humility in admitting that Goku is indeed number one and a better man than he. And thus, the character arc for Vegeta was finally complete. He put his jealousy and selfishness aside and realized that Goku was just a better fighter than him, and he had to work with Goku to make himself better and to save everyone who he loved. He was one of the good guys now after a long and painful life, and really, it's the best story told in the Buu arc. It's fascinating to me that the Buu arc focused so much on spirituality, and it makes me wonder what Toriyama may have been thinking at the time, or if he was going through anything that he was trying to keep private, but we may never know. So even if the writing is rather weak at parts, I like this about the Buu Saga. It makes it kind of unique. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you liked all of my retrospectives at the 4 arcs of Dragon Ball Z. But wait, what about Dragon Ball? What about the overarching themes? Well, keep an eye out towards the future. I will see you then.